Authorities alerted on prisoner beatings in PNG's prisons. NRI Director says PNG needs to stop gambling on future prospective revenues. And plans underway to train national doctors for Operation Open Heart.
This is National EMTV News with Tokana Hasavi.
Good evening and welcome to another working week. It's good to have your company. A series of images showing prisoners with injuries sustained from alleged beatings by prison officers have been sent to the Correctional Service Commissioner, Michael Waipo, for further investigations. The images are understood to have been taken by the inmates soon after the beatings and were sent anonymously to EMTV News with an appeal to get the CS Commissioner, CS Minister and the Prime Minister to look into alleged prisoner abuses that are happening in Papua New Guinea's prisons. We warn that some of the images may be disturbing to viewers.
These images of prisoners at the Buimo jail were taken on the morning of May this year. They were sent to EMTV from reliable sources who can't be named for safety reasons. According to the sources, at least 3 prisoners were beaten with a blunt object after they were jailed over the killing of a policeman from Pindu. The images came with an appeal for the pictures to be sent to the CS Commissioner Michael Waipo and the CS Minister so that the injustices would be investigated and put to light. About a month after these images were taken, the men in the picture reportedly escaped with more than 60 others in a mass prison breakout. They are now on the run from police and CS officers. In June, the Correctional Service sent officers from Port Moresby to investigate the circumstances that could have triggered the mass escape. The circumstances include the living conditions of prisoners and their treatment by prison officers. Meanwhile, the report into the Buimo prison escape has been completed. And when we spoke to CS Commissioner Michael Waipo earlier today, he said the report detailing the factors behind the escape has been passed on to the CS Minister for further comments and will be released later this week. And while this report may contain details only relating to the Buimo incident, it is also reflective of other prisons around the country. Scott Wide, National EMTV News, Lae.
The 4 soldiers implicated in the assault of a 17-year-old student were in court this morning. They fronted Magistrate John Kaumi at the Waigani Committal Court. Their case has been adjourned to Friday for a bail application hearing.
The Waigani Committal Court will decide on Friday whether to grant bail to the 4 soldiers. The soldiers have been charged and locked up at the Boroko police cell on 1 count each of attempted murder. Results from the investigations will also determine whether the case be heard in the National Court. The Papua New Guinea Defence Force hierarchy has been working closely with police to complete the investigations. Commander PNGDF Brigadier General Gilbert Toropo says this is just the beginning of tough measures to be taken against undisciplined soldiers. General Toropo warned servicemen and women to learn from this and maintain their professionalism on and off duty. Parents of Jeremiah Yinu welcome the investigations and want justice to prevail. Jeremiah is still under close supervision by doctors at the Port Moresby General Hospital Intensive Care Unit. He was bashed by soldiers during the recent Kila Secondary School cultural show. He has shown signs of improvement but is still in a coma. Mickey Cavera, National EMTV News.
The Institute of National Affairs Director says the Ok Mining Limited temporary shutdown comes at an awkward financial time for the country. Speaking to EMTV News about the economic climate in the country, Paul Barker says the government needs to stop gambling on future prospective revenues in their budgets and to carefully manage what the country has on hand.
With the temporary closure of Ok Mine, Barker says it is more than a little coincidence that this is happening after the government has acquired controlling shares in the company.
I mean, these are obviously public assets now, so the government really needs to be extremely accountable to the people of Western Province and to the people of the country about what its plans are. But it's a little difficult to to see the details at this stage.
He says while the reasons for the closure are beyond the government's control, the closure of one of the country's biggest revenue earner comes at a difficult time for the country.
You also have shorter-term intermissions in some of the other mining operations around the country as well, and it's also at a time when when basically LNG revenue is fundamentally going to the creditors who have provided the loans. So there's only dribs and drabs of revenue coming through in dividends, etc. through, and obviously for a much lower level because of the lower gas prices, LNG prices through to Japan, Taiwan, China, etc. So.
Earlier last week, while speaking on the closure of Oktedi Mine, the Prime Minister said the government is aware of the issues at hand.
That's not our doing. It's not because we are mismanaging the economy. It's because of global circumstances. That's why we need to, on a weekly basis, manage our country's budget, and that's what we are doing.
However, Baka says some of these issues were made clear to the government last year.
Treasury staff and people outside the Treasury, commentators, were telling the government, you need to have a change of your budget for 2015 now. But of course they deferred it and sort of denied that it was going to have any effect until now, when government saying, oh well, look, you know, we couldn't foresee these falls in the commodity prices. Well,
and he says while the country grapples with these economic issues, it must not forget its prime responsibility.
So a lot of factors are influencing what's happening at the moment, but it's really critically important that the PNG government, central bank and other players really handle this wisely and responsibly, and certainly don't forget that the real priority, the purpose of a government is to provide those basic services, law and order, basic infrastructure, health, education services, etc. for its own population.
Sarah Aupong, National MTV News.
Still to come on National MTV News tonight, progress in Operation Open Heart, also government funding affects NDB loans and growing rice in Makam. Stay with us for those stories plus more. Welcome back to National MTV News. Operation Open Heart has opened new doors to help save lives in Papua New Guinea. The foundation has now invested in plans to send national doctors overseas to train in heart surgery. Operation Open Heart patron and Moresby South MP Justin Chichenko says this initiative begins with the first female doctor to attend studies in Singapore.
4 years now, Operation Open Heart has saved and changed the lives of Papua New Guineans throughout surgeries at the Port Moresby General Hospital. Now it has taken another step to invest in PNG doctors for further training through studies.
Behind our Papua New Guinean doctors, support them, fund them, train them, and make them become champions in their medical field.
Patron Chachenko said the help of overseas doctors have been great, and through this investment, more national doctors will be involved to save lives. Mr. Chachenko announced that Dr. Elizabeth Alok is the first recipient to be selected.
We congratulate her, not only as a woman, but also as a doctor, to go out there, be trained professionally, to come back to look after our people.
Operation Open Heart fundraising chair Lady Katie Johnson said their effort in fundraisers is inspired to see local doctors get involved.
There are very few female cardiac surgeons in the world, and PNG is going to have one of the pioneers, which is very exciting news.
Wonderful.
It is very good news.
Dr. Elizabeth Alok will be the first woman enlisted for studies in Singapore and was involved in a few of the Open Heart operations last week. The initiative will focus for the next 4 years. Jekla Power Jr., National MTV News.
Inadequate government funding into National Development Bank is likely to cause disruptions with the rollout of the small to medium enterprises loans. NDB has announced today that 498 approved loans will not be funded. Managing Director Moses Liu says this is due to a shortfall of 160 million kina, yet to be paid by the government since 2013.
The future of the proposed SME policy to be implemented by the National Development Bank is in uncertainty. The government has not provided money to the National Development Bank to lend to the SME sector this year. However, the bank has been using its internally generated cash flow to fund loans this year at a value of 38 million kina. Managing Director Moses Liu says the bank cannot continue to use its internal funds to lend to SME startup customers.
Because we have reduced funding to other areas of the operations, and we've diverted funds to fund these loans. And the government has not released the 50 million that was allocated to NDB under the 2015 national budget.
NDB announces today that they have approved loans for 498 customers valued at over 53 million kina. However, they cannot fund these loans because of the lack of government funding. In late 2012, the government launched its SME stimulus package, and on January 1st, 2013, NDB reduced its lending rate to 6.5%. Under this arrangement, the government was supposed to provide NDB with 100 million kina annually to implement its SME policy. But since 2013, only 140 million kina was given. An outstanding balance of 160 million kina is yet to be paid. The bank's managing director says if government's assistance has not improved, they will be forced to review the lending interest rate.
If the government does not provide adequate funding to NDB to implement the SME stimulus package, then the board and the management will be forced to review the lending interest rate in a view to reverting back to the previous lending regime to sustain the bank's operations going forward.
He says customers will not be affected this year. However, if government's funding is not forthcoming, changes will be expected. The SME sector has made up 10% of the country's economy, and the SME loan has increased to nearly 25% this year. Quinten Alomp, National EMTV News.
The rice development agreement between a Makam rice cooperative, Trukai, and the provincial government to develop rice in the Makam Valley is being discussed. In June, the company and the provincial governments met with a group of Makam people seeking support to develop and purchase rice in order to cut back on imports. Trukai CEO Greg Worthington Aya says the company aims to set up trials with rice varieties in the coming wet season. MTV's Bethany Harriman has this report.
The rice development agreement is being discussed with the Morobe provincial government to involve Makam farmers. Trukai CEO Greg Worthington Air says the company looks to develop and purchase rice from local farmers in an agreement.
We have developed a rice purchasing and development agreement, which is currently being discussed with the provincial government as a three-way agreement between Trukai, the farming group, and also the provincial government for support. Which hopefully we want to set up some trials for rice varieties, etc., for the coming wet season.
On the 24th of June, the company and the Morobe provincial government met with villagers in the Makam Valley to speak to them about a three-way partnership.
You grow in rice, company by come inside long.
On that day, Morobe Governor Kelly Naru said the provincial government supports that arrangement.
This exercise is basically to come in to support them, to mobilize and organize the landowners into local ILGs and cooperatives, and basically supporting them with logistics and a bit of funding so that they organize themselves to basically come into this partnership.
Since 1990, Papua New Guinea has been importing an average of 152,000 tons of rice per year. Most of the rice were coming from Asian countries like Thailand and Vietnam to serve a dedicated PNG consumer market. But that's about to change with rice development such as this one. Papua New Guinea hopes to become an exporter of rice and not just an importer. Bethany Harriman, National EMTV News, Lae.
The sovereign wealth fund must be managed properly with the highest principle of governance. Director of the Institute of National Affairs, Paul Barker, said this in an interview with NTV News this afternoon. Mr. Barker says the Sovereign Wealth Fund is critically important and it must not be manipulated by the government or any other agencies.
Mr. Barker gave an insight into the newly passed Sovereign Wealth Fund for the country. He said the SWF has two components that needs to be managed properly if PNG wants a sustainable future. He says the Sovereign Wealth Fund depends highly on the stabilization and saving funds that are important when there is a drop in commodity prices in world markets.
Sovereign Wealth Fund is as good as how it's managed. It's got to be, the public needs to know that it's its fund, that it's got to be managed for the benefit of the people of Papua New Guinea in the short term and in the longer term.
Barker says the government must now try to avoid banking on non-renewable resources and cut down on borrowing, which in the long run can affect other income-generating sectors like agriculture. But he stressed on the importance of the stabilization component of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which he says depends on the revenue generated from the mining and agriculture sector. Again, these revenues must be well managed.
So the stabilization is very much about when commodity prices and flows are strong, that you're putting funds into that, and when the prices are low and the government needs to maintain its revenue, then you're withdrawing from the stabilization fund and putting it into the government's revenue.
Last year, the National Research Institute released a report on the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The paper was an analysis of Papua New Guinea's process towards formulating its SWF. The research revealed that PNG is highly dependent on non-renewable resources, which leaves the future of PNG uncertain. It also revealed that revenue from resources has failed to impact Papua New Guinea with tangible development and delivery of services in the last 20 years.
And so we are put in a very risky position along with other countries who are mainly dependent on the mineral sector for its contribution to the GDP. Because if we spend it now, we don't know whether it will be, the benefits will be there if we spend it. If we misspend it, then the future generation is also going to lose out.
For now, Mr. Barker says a higher legislation must be set to monitor the flow of revenue into the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
So it's important that it is hands-off, it's managed, the stabilization is managed according to its formula, and that the savings fund is not just sort of used on an ad hoc way.
The Sovereign Wealth Fund was passed in Parliament last week, with Prime Minister Peter O'Neill maintaining that it's for the future generation of Papua New Guinea.
The Sovereign Wealth Fund are managed in accordance with the highest principles of governance and accountability.
Stanley Ovett Jr., National EMTV News.
And now we check out the finance news. The kina closed unchanged at $0.3605 in the interbank market. At Bank South Pacific, our kina was trading at $0.3530 $0.4804 Australian dollars, $0.3178 euro, and 43.35 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold, coffee, cocoa, and copper all closed the day higher. Palm oil closed the day higher as well, while crude oil and copper closed the day lower. And finally, on the stock market, the Dow Jones closed at 56 points lower, the ASX closed at 28 points higher, and the All Ordinaries closed at 30 points higher as well. Among more stories coming up after the break, the brutal killing of a journalist in Mexico. Stay with us. Thanks for your company and welcome back to the news. Youths living around the Burns Peak area in Moresby's northwest have stripped off parts of a vehicle involved in a car accident at the Poraporona Freeway here in Port Moresby this afternoon. The vehicle, a white Dyna belonging to Pride Furniture, was almost stripped off in just 20 minutes after the accident. NTV's Tekla Gunga reports.
Police arrived in time to save parts of this vehicle. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, the two mirrors, including the two headlights, and 3 of the tires were already stripped off.
This footage shows some youths draining fuel from the fuel tank while others trying to remove the tire on the passenger side. According to Mark Magani, a bystander who was present at the time of the accident, said this diner was making a U-turn when it ran into the oncoming vehicle, another white diner belonging to Paradise Aquarium. The driver of the Pride Furniture vehicle fled the scene while the driver of the Paradise Aquarium, Lucky Geni, hung around until police arrived. Is Ofsider, who refused to comment on camera, had received minor cuts to his face. The accident that also slowed the movement of vehicles traveling into Hohola from Konidobu. Police officers are currently guarding the two vehicles. Takla Gunga, National MTV News.
There is a steady decline in the level of literacy rates in the Morobe province. That's from the Morobe Provincial Education Advisor, Keith Jiram. He said this during the launching of National Book Week today at Leigh St. Mary's Primary School.
According to Morobe Provincial Education Advisor Keith Jiram, literacy among students within the province is declining. Mr. Jiram said this following an unpleasing rate of Morobe students he revealed could not get selected for further studies to secondary schools and higher institutions because of poor literacy.
Say grade 8 to grade 9, the percentage isn't pleasing. The grade 10 selection to grade 11, the percentage isn't pleasing. Grade 11 to 12 and 12 to tertiary institutions, it isn't pleasing. So what we think now is we come back to basic. We come back to basic and we start looking at those basics and we take them on into the system. And one of those basics that we are looking at is library. Yes, of course, the system had not given any prominence to library. Morobe is now taking it on. We are giving it prominence now. So we are going to build a 4-story building, and that is going to capture the library, public library, and archives. Among archives, the FODE tutorial, the FODE program. And
the provincial education is working to improve the number of students lacking skills of reading books by encouraging a structured library system. It also has plans in place for the construction of a 4-story building that will house public library and archives for students and the public within Morobe. Today, Director General for National Library and Archives, Kakaito Kasi, announced 148,000 kina worth of reading books was presented for 16 schools to enhance students' learning.
Education system, we have the schools, we have classrooms, teachers, and library services is one of the functions that we support the education department to deliver these services to all the children. Like children must have access to reading books.
The call for improved literacy amongst the educated population continues to be a priority for all education officials in the country. However, the challenge has been the level of illiteracy in most of the country's rural areas. Colin Barila, National MTV News, Leigh.
Turning overseas now, in Central America, the brutal killing of a prominent news photographer in Mexico last Friday, along with 4 others, has brought attention to Mexico's status as one of the most dangerous places for media workers and freedom of expression. The news photographer has claimed he felt threatened by Veracruz Governor Javier Duarte in interviews a month before his death. MTV's Alana Leia has this report.
U.S. NGO Freedom House ranked Mexico's press status as not free, while scoring the nation's political environment at 31 out of 40. In Mexico's most populous city of Veracruz, 17 journalists have been slain since 2000. 31-year-old Ruben Becerril is the latest victim of Veracruz's turbulent political environment.
Los cuerpos localizados en las distintas habitaciones.
The bodies, which were located in different rooms, each had a bullet wound to the head from a 9mm gun, as well as bruises on various other parts of their bodies, presumably from some previous force used against them.
The bodies were found in a middle-class neighborhood of Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. Veracruz Governor Javier Duarte, who Becerril had felt threatened by, is a member of Mexico President Enrique Peña Nieto's Institutional Revolutionary Party. Becerril had documented many local social movements that proved critical of Duarte and Mexico's ruling party. In his last recorded interview, Becerril spoke of why he left Veracruz a month earlier before his fateful return.
I had to leave because it was not a direct threat, but I got the message. It was just recently when students were attacked and brutally beaten with machetes. In these situations, we can't do less without any type of aggression or intimidation because we don't know what might happen. Veracruz is a lawless state.
Alana Lay, MTV World News.
Well, more debris was discovered yesterday on the French island of Reunion following the discovery of wreckage possibly belonging to the Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. The debris remains unidentified and will join the Boeing 777 flapper-on wing part discovered last Wednesday for further investigations at a French military lab. Malaysian investigators joined the search efforts last Friday, but a Malaysian official said the new wreckage found yesterday does not actually belong to a plane and has nothing to do with MH370 investigations. The Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 was carrying 239 passengers, mostly Chinese, when it disappeared in March last year. Investigators are speculating that MH370's transponder was switched off deliberately before it was diverted thousands of miles off course. Well, National EMTV News continues with True Guy Sports. That's coming up next, and we'll give you all the details when we come back. Stay tuned.
True Guy Sports.
Welcome to True Guy Sports. A Fiji local daily, the Fiji Times, reported that it was the biggest Pacific Games yet, and according to the Pacific Games Council President Vidya Lakan, the best games ever. The facilities were classified as world-class, even though there was a bit of rush work to complete the venues. The paper also reported that there were security concerns which the PNG government suppressed by having the police and military on the streets. MTV's Shane Soroya has this report.
The Pacific Games was rated as almost as equivalent to the Olympic Games for some sports and for some island nations as well. These were listed by FASANOC President Joe Roden. Mr. Roden said there was no one in Fiji who had said, "Have a good time," when he was preparing to fly over to Port Moresby to spend 19 days in PNG. All he had seemed to be getting was stay safe. But despite the warnings, the Pacific Games was a very memorable experience, he said. The highlights of the Games were the opening ceremony. The organizers of the Pacific Games had contracted the same company that had done the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games, and Port Moresby was humming. When streets were closed and people lined up for almost a kilometer to get to the ticket booths, the teams of the different countries had lined up from 3 p.m. and along with them the various cultural performers. The tall stages were on either side and the center stage where the performers and teams passed through. The night concluded with fireworks with more than 15,000 in attendance and 1 million more on television. The Daily reported the information flow was not that efficient and different venues rarely shared information with each other. The best organized venue was Taurama Aquatic Center, where the team headed by Constance and Cyril kept all media informed of upcoming events and results were available 5 minutes after the event. This was unlike the other venues. Despite the minor setbacks, the athletes had the best time. The Games Village was a hive of activity and allowed athletes to make new friends. The people of Port Moresby turned out to be very good hosts. According to some, the Games ensured Moresby was the safest it had been in years. And there was hope that it would stay this way.
International nature, and they have exactly 4 years to do so. Shane Soroya, National EMTV Sports.
Well, he is one of the most liked and talked about athletes here in the Pacific, and following the 15th Pacific Games in Papua New Guinea, Banuvet Tabakautoro already has a mass following in Port Moresby. While his performance at the Games secured a gold medal and the following of a nation, it hadn't given him the green light to Rio for the 2016 Olympics. Under enormous pressure, but with the support of his Melanesian counterparts, Banuve believes he can and will qualify for Rio at the World Championships in China later this month.
The fastest man in the Pacific has fast become one of the most liked and talked about in Papua New Guinea, not just because of his unbelievable speed on the tracks, but because of his humbling charisma.
Well, it is pretty good considering how strong the wind was, and the competition was pretty good as well. So, you know, I expected some really fast times as well. So I'm pretty pleased with my performance, and you know, just 0.03 off qualifying for Olympics in the 200. So I was pretty close.
Banuve Tabakau isn't just qualifying for the 2016 Rio Olympics for Fiji, but to represent his Melanesian brothers and sisters.
Experience on how Pacific Islanders compete during big competitions like that. Something that I'd like to give back is high quality competition. As long as I'm competing with my Pacific Island brothers and sisters, the competition level should move up pretty quick, and you know, I feel now that at this level we should be.
He speaks of the 2015 Pacific Games as one of the most overwhelming experiences of his athletic career, and although there is a sense of pressure, with the support of Papua New Guinea and Fiji behind him, he is fairly confident about qualifying.
Just honored, you know, just to be out there and to be competing in front of you know, those kind of people, and yeah, preparation's been really good. You know, I'm still injury free, I'm healthy, and you know, coach and I will find out how ready I am on the day of competition. So that's pretty much it.
Coach Bola Tafo was also disappointed in Banuve's performance. However, he too is confident in Banuve's qualification.
Fortunately, he couldn't qualify for the Olympics because the wind was too strong. We were 300 of a second away from the 200 meters with a minus 1.6 wind, but then ran 10.53 with a minus 2.6 headwind. That is if the wind wasn't there, it would be like a 10-1 or something like that, or low 10-2. So we're pretty happy with the way he performed.
Papua New Guinea's sprinters will also be travelling to China for the World Championships. Lorraine Genia, National EMTV Sports.
Over to rugby, Fiji and Samoa have had a positive build-up, dominating in the 2015 World Rugby Pacific Nations Cup. And with 46 days remaining before the 2015 Rugby World Cup, both countries have been undefeated, showing promising signs of a strong Rugby World Cup campaign. Fiji has been placed in Pool A alongside World Rugby giants Australia, England and Wales, while Samoa in Pool B with South Africa, Japan, Scotland and USA. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Argentina will play each other in the Rugby Championships, while Australia and New Zealand will go face-to-face this month for the start of the 2015 Bledisloe Cup. Well, True Guy Sports continues after the break. Netball World Cup to commence in Sydney this week. Stay tuned for that.
True Guy Sports.
Pearls qualified for the World Cup after winning the Oceania qualification held in the Cook.
Good to have you back with True Guy Sports. The 2015 Netball World Cup is set to commence in Sydney from the 7th of August to the 16th. The two Pacific Island countries who will be competing are Fiji and Samoa. The Fijian Pearls are the Pacific Games champions and will be looking to perform during the World Cup against champion netball nations Australia and New Zealand.
Currently ranked 7th in the world, the Fiji Pearls qualified for the World Cup after winning the Oceania qualification held in the Cook Islands in June last year. This will be their 8th World Cup appearance and they will be looking to improve their current ranking. They will be in Pool D, while the other Pacific Island nation, Samoa, will be in Pool B. Samoa, ranked 14th, earned their spot at the World Cup when they edged out Papua New Guinea and Cook Islands at the Oceania qualification. This will be Samoa's 7th World Cup appearance. Their highest World Cup finish was in 2003 in Jamaica when they finished 6th out of 24 nations. Unfortunately, the Papua New Guinea Peppers did not qualify for the 2015 Netball World Cup after they were edged out in the Oceania qualifier by Fiji and Samoa. Dion Kombeng, National EMTV Sports.
Well, Trukai Sports ends on that note. I'll be back with the weather details for the next 24 hours. Stay tuned for that.
Trukai Sports.
Taking a quick look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours in southern region, Port Moresby, Darwin, Karama, sunny. Tomorrow, fine weather. In Momase, mostly fine, then afternoon thundery showers developing in Bunnymoor, while the other centres mostly fine. In Lorengau, mostly fine with few afternoon showers developing. Lorengau, mostly fine and windy. And lastly, in the Highlands region, all centres cloudy with chances of light showers and drizzles. Now, recapping our top stories again tonight before we go. Authorities alerted on prisoner beatings in PNG's prisons. Also, NRI Director says PNG needs to stop gambling on future prospective revenues, and plans underway to train national doctors for Operation Open Heart. Well, that's been the bulletin this Monday from the news team. I'm Tokana Hasavi Jr. Thanks for your company. You have a pleasant working week and take care. Good night.